What's up, you guys? Hey, welcome. I'm so glad that you're here. I'm glad that I'm back. And I want to give a shout out right now over social media to my cousin Ron. Hey, Ron Stevens. The reason I'm doing that is because I grew up with Ron and I are really close and love my cousin Ron. And a few weeks ago, Ron sent me a message and said, hey, just really enjoying your messages these days. I said, oh, thanks, man. That's great. He said, over the summer, your messages have gotten so much better. I said, hey, thanks. I really appreciate that, especially the last few weeks. It's like, you're just unbelievable. I said, that's really awesome. And then he goes, and what are you doing? You have lost so much weight. It was only at that moment that I went, dude, you're watching Tyler. You're not watching me, So I want to say a shout out to Ron. This is me in my fullness. And also special thanks to Tyler. Man, what a great job. It is so awesome to have you on our staff, and what a great addition and teaching pastor that he is. Well, we're launching into, this is not going away, you guys. Love where you live. We're going to keep going down this road, all right? We're not going to give up on this, and this is kind of become an annual series. Love where you live, and we are excited about it. And we are excited that we are a part of getting to change culture. And we believe that through the efforts of what we're laying out over the next 4 weeks will help our communities. It will help your neighborhoods. It will help us grow spiritually. And I'm super excited about it. And I hope you'll journey with us through the whole 4 weeks. About 36 years ago, I was 12 years old. And we were going on our family vacation. We had a 28-foot Terry camper trailer, and we would spend a lot of our summers going camping. My mom was already out in the vehicle ready to go. My sister was already out there. My dad was on the sidewalk. I was closing up. I was closing the front door. We were heading out for a couple of weeks, and I said this, and I'll never forget the words that my dad spoke to me. And I said, hey, Dad, do you want me to lock the door? And he looked at me with this puzzled look on his face and said, lock the door? Why would you lock the door? Our neighbors might need to borrow something while we're gone. That's so foreign today because you fast forward 36 years later and I wouldn't leave for 2 weeks, let alone for the day, and not lock my door. But that was the world that we lived in. And I think the problem is, and I think that I believe in this room, there's a lot of things I may say today that you don't agree with, and you'll just have to take a number and get in line, okay? But there may be a lot of things I say today that you don't agree with, but I bet you that if I were to do a survey, and I would say 100% of you in this room would agree with this statement, that something's wrong in our culture, something's broken, and what we're doing right now is not working. I think you would agree with me on that, And I think it's our responsibility, I know it's our responsibility as Christ followers to do something about that, to engage. And I believe God has given us the recipe for this. For 2,000 years, He's told us how to make this change and how to impact culture. And one of the things that we've got to do is we've got to learn to love our neighbors. We don't love our neighbors because we don't trust our neighbors anymore. We don't trust our neighbors anymore because we don't know our neighbors any longer. This is a picture, I did this just last night. This is a picture of my neighborhood growing up, Lexington Heights, a little small community between Lexington, Kentucky and Richmond, Kentucky. And where that little yellow pin is the house that I grew up from age 6 until 18 when I went away to school. And then my parents sold that house and moved to try to, lose me. And this is a neighborhood, I counted it out, I think there's like 49 or 50 homes in this neighborhood. It's about half the size of the neighborhood that I live in right now. So we had about 50 homes there. I can go down through and I can tell you every single, at one time or another, every single neighbor that lived in every single one of those homes. I knew their names. Now on this upper street up here, I might not have known their last names, but I knew every single person and their names. To the right of our house, if you're facing the house to the left of our house, Don Danko, his wife Linda Danko. They had 2 kids, Matthew and Katie. Don played football for the University of Kentucky. He got hurt on the final game of the season. He had a contract with the Dallas Cowboys. Never got to play professional ball, but ended up coaching high school football all of his life for Clark County High School. We still stay in contact with them. Don and my dad did gardening together. The house next to them was Jimmy Plummer, Jimmy and Wanda Plummer. Jimmy passed away about 10 years ago. They had 2 daughters, Regina Plummer and Pamela Plummer. Pamela died young in a tragic way too, and Wanda still watches our messages online. So hey, Wanda, and we're glad that you watch. I miss you a lot. And next to them was Lloyd Douglas Stocker. I know all 3 of his names. Lloyd Douglas Stocker, and his wife was Norma. Lloyd Douglas Stocker is a retired IBMer. He was a fabricator for IBM. They had 1 son named Paul, who's a pharmacist now in Danville, Kentucky. I still know that. I know these families. Why do I know that? Because we stayed in touch. We knew each other so well during those times. Next to them was Russell Brott. I knew Russell because Russell ran over my dog. Russell brought a gift. It's okay, dog was okay, but it allowed him to come and give us a gift. You know, he brought a gift to me for running over my dog, and he brought his son, Richie, who is 2 years older than me. To this day, Richie and I are still friends. Richie's in IT management in St. Louis, Missouri. He's a Christ follower. He's a solid guy. He's a good tennis player. He's married to his wife named Paula, and they have 2 children. His wife had cancer not too long ago. I prayed with him on the phone over that. Next to them is Glenn Davis, and I cannot for the life of me remember his wife's name. I knew her. I know you're going to be disappointed that I don't know the lady 7 houses down from me when I grew up, but I can't remember her name. But I sure do remember their daughters, Jennifer and Jessica. They were twins, okay? Yeah, and so I could keep on going, you guys, from Diane and Melvin Masters. They had 3 kids. I could keep on going. Why? Because we knew each other so well. We knew each other so well. And I know what you're thinking. We don't trust each other anymore. But the thing is that we still had the crazy people in our neighborhood, none of the ones that I mentioned. But we still had the crazy people, but we knew who the crazy people were, you know? And so my dad would say, hey, listen, I don't want you to go over or be around that house. You know, I don't want you to. There's something not right there. It's not safe. You know, you can still be nice and we'll still be polite, but there's something not right. I don't want you to be okay. The problem is now that we don't know who the crazy people are or the dangerous homes are. So what happens? We just assume that everybody's crazy, right? Because we don't know anybody, so we just assume that everybody is there. Now, here's the thing. The reason in our culture right now, the reason we have so much depression, the reason why we have so much worry, the reason why we have so much anxiety, the reason why there's so much stress, the reason why there are marital issues and drug addiction problems, the reason we find ourselves in financial crisis is because we don't trust God. We don't trust God because we don't fully know God. Now, if you missed last week's message, Pastor Tyler lays that out in a beautiful way that will help you understand why and how you need to grow closer and know God, not just from a head knowledge, but to know the heart of God. And when you begin to know the heart of God, your life begins to transform. You begin to change because as you know God, it takes talking to God to know God. As you begin to talk to God, as you begin to know God, you begin to trust God. When you get to this point and you finally trust God and you begin to listen to what He has to say to you and you obey God, your life begins to change. Your world begins to change. And that's the way it is. The more that we know God, the more we've been talking to Him. And that's so critical for us. And if you did not watch that message, watch that message. I'm telling you, it will change your life. But God knew that there's 2 parts connected to this. It's part in knowing Him, and He also, and you may not agree with this part, I may not have every one of you agree with this, but God knew that at least on this earth and in this world, that having God wasn't even just enough. Even God alone wasn't just enough for us. He knew that it was important for us to have somebody with skin on to do this life with. To do this section of our timeline of eternity, to do this section with, it was important for us to know people and to do life with people who had skin on. That's why it's so critical for us. And he gives us the commandment. And that if we obey this commandment, if we live our lives in this way, we will be so much stronger, we will be more enriched, and we will be culture changers if we will just do this one thing. And that's to love our neighbor. We will be culture changers if we love our neighbor. Here's what God says. There's two groups of Jewish religious leaders. There's the Sadducees and there are the Pharisees. They're very similar. There's one distinctive difference between the two, but they're Sadducees and Pharisees. You may have heard this if you've grown up or read the Bible or anything. They're Sadducees and Pharisees. In both of these groups, they felt threatened by Jesus. They felt threatened by his ministry, and they figured out that if there was some way that they could trap Jesus into saying something that was against God's laws or against God's ways or the things that he had laid out to his people, if there was some way they could trap him to get him to say something that was contradictory to his word, then it would cause Jesus to be arrested and ultimately killed, and it would get Jesus out of their hair. And so the Sadducees, they came up with this question to kind of trap Jesus on. Here I'm going to start with Matthew chapter 22, and we'll start with verse 23. It's going to be on the screens. Portions of it will be. But I still think there's value in you grabbing your own scripture. Here it is, Matthew 22, starting with verse 23. It says, that same day, Jesus was approached by some Sadducees. Religious leaders were Sadducees who say there is no resurrection from the dead. Now, so this is just a little memory jog for you. If you ever get to a point where you can't remember the difference between the Sadducees and the Pharisees, the Sadducees were these religious leaders that believed that once you died, you died. You lived this life, you died, you were buried in the ground, and that was it. There was no eternal life. There was no resurrection from the dead. And so the way that you can remember this is that they were sad, you see. Because if you believe that and you believe that this world is all there is and that you're going to die and that you're going to go on the ground and you're just not going to exist anymore, what's the purpose of living? You're sad, you see. So that's how you can remember. They were Sadducees. Well, they posed this question to Jesus, and it says, Teacher, Moses said, and they're going to go, there's always these exception to the rules people. Do you know those people that, you have this kind of normal way of doing things, and then there's always somebody that comes along and goes, but what if this happens? And what if this happens? And so these are the exception people. So the Sadducees are trying to trap him up on this exception to the law kind of a thing. He says, Teacher, if a man dies without children, his brother should marry the widow and have a child. Who will carry on the brother's name? Okay. Well, they said, suppose there were 7 brothers, and the oldest one married and then died without children. So his brother married the widow. But the second brother also died, and the third brother married her. This continued with all 7 of them. Last of all, the woman also died. So tell us, Jesus, whose wife will she be in the resurrection? For all 7 were married to her. And so Jesus kind of lays this out, and it's kind of like you just kind of want to go, as we look at this, we just kind of go, what? That's just crazy, you know what? But Jesus lays this out. He says, first of all, he says, I don't know why, I'm paraphrasing this. He says, I don't know why you guys are trying to trap me up on this, because you're sad, you see, because you don't even believe in the resurrection. Why do you even care about this? Because you don't believe in the resurrection. And so he says, let me address this first part first. Because I don't understand why you don't believe in the resurrection. How could you not believe in the resurrection? Because our God is a God of the living, not a God of the dead. For instance, he says, take Abraham. Long after Abraham, so Abraham had lived a godly life and he died. Isaac lived a godly life and he died. Jacob lived a godly life and he died. So Jesus said, they know this, okay? So Jesus comes along and says, long after Abraham and Isaac and Jacob had died, long after they had died, God said, I am the God of Abraham. So Jesus is telling them, I'm the God of Abraham currently. I'm the God of Abraham right now. Yeah, Abraham's been dead for years and years and years, but I'm the God of Abraham right now. I'm the God of Isaac right now, currently, in this moment. I'm the God of Jacob right now. And if you guys knew the scripture, you would know that our God is the God of the living, not the dead. So I thought I'd just take a pause from the love where you live part and love your neighbor's part and just say this. I know that some of you probably struggle with this. You know, is heaven real? What's our purpose? Is this all there is? If I live this life and I die and I just go in the grave and I cease to exist? Is that what living this life is about? And what you have to understand is that there's more to this life than this life that we live right here on earth. This is a pass-through for us to know how we're going to love God in the future, whether we're going to love God in the future. And there is more to living than just being born and dying. There's a purpose to your life, and that is to get to know your Creator, to get to know intimately the God of the universe. He wants you to know Him. And you'll never move beyond anything. You'll never learn how to love anyone until you fully get to know God. You have to know Him. But the second part of this text is where he's saying, but now let's look at this just for a second. You guys are taking this law thing, you're taking this way out of context. This is not about religion. This is not a group of man-made laws here. This is so much more than religion. This is about relationships. The whole idea for the law is to help us figure out how to love people better. The idea of the law here that Jesus is saying, and I'm paraphrasing, the idea of the law here that Jesus is saying is that, hey, if your brother dies, take care of his wife. Don't let her be struggling and floundering out there. Take care of his wife. If his wife dies, console and take care of your brother. If their child is left alone and both of them die, don't leave any orphans left behind. Take care of the children. So these laws are in place to help us to be able to love and to have deeper, greater relationships. And so when Jesus lays all this out for them, it quietens down the Sadducees. They didn't know how to respond to that. They couldn't respond to that. But then the Pharisees hear about this, and they come over and they have like a sideline conversation. Sideline conversations can be dangerous things sometimes, but the Pharisees, they all get in a little huddle, a little holy huddle, and they say, all right, what are we going to do? How are we going to trap him up? All right, and one guy goes, I got it. Just you guys, watch this. He comes over and he goes, teacher, I got it. What's the most important commandment that Moses laid out for us? What's the most important commandment of all? Now, what you have to realize, they would have known this, Jesus would have known this, that there were 613 laws that they had to remember. 613 laws that the Jews had to remember. And so they're trying to trip him up. They're all important. Which one, Jesus, is the most important? And you know this. I pray that you could stand up here right now and preach this message about the number one thing that's the most important. Jesus doesn't hesitate. He doesn't pause. He says to love the Lord your God with all of your heart, with all of your soul, with all of your mind. Love the Lord your God. And how can they argue with that? But then Jesus goes, but the second one is equally important to it. I can't just give you this law without giving you this one. It's of equal importance. And you just kind of look at this, we look at this, and we just kind of go, what could possibly be equal to loving the God of the universe? The God in all his power and all of his glory who speaks and creation is formed. He speaks and the stars are in existence. He speaks and the planets are somehow rotating around and keeping their positions. He speaks and there's life. What could possibly be equal to that? But Jesus, in his full authority that only Jesus could do, only Jesus could say, only Jesus could speak this because of full authority. Jesus says the second law is just as equally as important in that. And that's just where it kind of gets crazy, because we go, what could possibly be equal? And Jesus says these simple words, but yet profound and powerful. Love your neighbor as yourself. Love your neighbor as yourself. And then he says this, all the laws, the entire law, everything that you've ever read about God that's been written by the prophets, everything that's been taught to you in the synagogues, everything that's been spoken from times past and in the times future, everything that I will ever say to you, everything that anybody in the future will ever say to you or ever has said to you, everything hangs on these two commands. To love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, and to love your neighbor as yourself. If you could somehow picture this with me, church, if we could take these two commands and we could nail them up against the backdrop of eternity and against the timelines of eternity, if we could somehow just nail these two commands up, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, and let's nail this one up to love your neighbor as yourself. If either one of those falls off, they both fall off. They're connected to each other. You can't have one without the other. So let me say this. You cannot love your neighbor, not fully, not completely. You cannot love your neighbor if you do not love God. You cannot love your neighbor if you do not know God. Some of you get this. Some of you know, as soon as I say it, you get this. You go, yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. Because if you saw my neighbor, you know my neighbor, it has to be a supernatural love that comes through because he is a pistol. You know, there is no doubt about it that there's only way that I could love this guy is because God's love in me. Because I'm telling you what, he's unlovable. It might be you that's the one that's unlovable. I don't know, you know. But you cannot fully and completely love your neighbor unless you love God. Now, here's one for you, though. Now, I'm going to say this, and there's going to be a lot of you in here that don't agree with me. There's going to be some of you that are going to be mad at me for saying this. There's some of you that are going to try to justify what I'm about to say. You're going to try to figure out some loopholes. You're going to try to figure out, it's going to hurt you. It's going to cut you. Some of you are going to agree with me but wish I didn't say it. And here it is. Wrestle with this. Chew on this today. Talk about this with your families. You cannot love God unless you love your neighbor. Think about that. You cannot love God unless you love your neighbor. Mitch, I cannot love God unless I have a heart for my neighbor, no matter how much of a pistol I may think that he is. That's difficult. It's hard enough to say that we can't love our neighbor without loving God. But it's a challenge for us to say that we can't love God unless we love our neighbor. The two are connected. Everything you've ever heard, everything you've ever known, it's all about your relationship with God and your relationship with your neighbors. Sometimes, though, I feel like that when we say one thing on the stage, or if I say one thing on the stage, you're thinking something else. You're thinking I mean something else. And so I just want to bring clarity to this. You know, for instance, like, if I say we need to be involved in discipleship, I think it's very easy for some of you guys to not know exactly what that means. you think I'm meaning that you need to go into a Bible study. You know, discipleship, you think you hear Bible study. Discipleship is so much more than Bible study. Discipleship is that you're learning how to be a follower of Jesus. You're learning to get to know Jesus. Yeah, you want to know about him from his word, but you also want to know the heart of Jesus and what it means to be a full disciple where you're becoming like him. You're becoming a small version of Jesus. That's what we mean when we say discipleship. We don't mean Bible study, although we think there's value in that. For instance, if we say, you know, we want you to become like Jesus, you know, we don't want you to think or have this vision in your mind that we want you to be dressed in some white robe, wearing sandals, walking everywhere you went, speaking in riddles. That's not what we mean when we say become like Jesus. What we mean is that you begin to put others before yourself. That your whole life, your whole world revolves around serving others rather than serving yourself. We want you to experience a life of less stress and less anxiety and more about love and peace and patience and kindness and gentleness, loving the people that you're around. When we say that we want you to love your neighbors, sometimes I get the impression anyway that you might think or you might view that we want you to be some sort of proselytizing, Bible-thumping, annoying, win you to heaven, save you from hell, no matter what the cost is kind of neighbor. And that's not what we mean. We just want you to engage, to love your neighbor, just to show love. This is not what we mean. Watch this video here.
Hi! It's your neighbors, Jim and Joanna Sanders.
From next door.
How are you? Hey, we totally know that you don't like going to church with us, so we're not even here to invite you to church, all right? Well, we're not even here to tell you the 4 little happy hops to heaven.
We're not even here to sell you fire insurance. You know, from down there.
Get that hell?
Yeah.
No. Hey, honestly, what we want to do right now is we just want to serve you through the blood of Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
Huh? That's a good thing. That's a good thing.
Okay, don't be afraid.
Hold the phone. Now, we know that you don't get us.
No.
And why should you? You're a heathen.
That's
we get
right,
that, all right?
yeah.
So what we want to do is just be here to understand you and to serve you in some ways. You know, what can we do for you? That's what Jesus asked all the time. Now, we noticed on your mailbox that you had some balloons out there. Did someone die? Can we offer some condolences?
No. Oh, you had a baby.
Oh. Pink means joyfulness. I get it.
I told you.
Okay, now how about this? Can we wash something for you? You're probably tired.
That's a great
Maybe
idea.
we could wash your dishes.
Yeah, or wash your car.
Wash the lawn.
Wash
the
your
mailbox. Wash the dog.
Oh, he said wash the dog.
We could even wash the washer for you.
Wash the
Not.
Oh, he said not.
I love putting that word at the end of a sentence.
Oh, do it again.
I got nothing. Not. You see what I did? I brought the comedy back around. I'm sorry. No, really. How about we not do any of that, but we just come to do what we should do and let us just wash your feet?
Yeah, because you know, wait, hang on. I'm not done. Jesus washed the disciples' feet, and so we want to wash your feet.
Yeah, we know you're not our disciple. Yet. Hold on. Here, look at me. All right, what I'm going to do is, I just got this water basin here, and I just want to wash your foot.
Yeah.
All right, now stick out your
So
big
put it
toe.
out
Just stick
there.
out your big toe.
Hang
Come
on, no.
This will be over in just a minute. If you
Yeah,
just
it just takes a second.
Okay, now I got the shoe. Now just give me your toe.
Yeah,
all right? Come on,
put
just
the
give me
toe
your.
over me.
Well, that's a fine howdy do.
I know.
All right, well, we'll just leave the shoe here.
We'll leave the brownies.
I guess we'll go next door.
Okay, can I talk more this time?
It's not your place, baby.
Okay.
What a friend we have in Jesus.
All right, you guys. If that's you, please don't tell them you go to River Run, all right? Like that's not what we're trying to communicate here. We're just trying to get you to walk across the street and engage with your neighbor. We're trying to get you to walk across the yard. Let me tell you a story. Back at the beginning of summer here, when I first started taking my little study break, I was doing some work in the yard, and I'm next door to an 84-year-old Puerto Rican man named Hector. He is awesome. I don't know him nearly as well as I would like to, but I'm back in the backyard working. He still mows his yard and still works like a dog out there. I mean, he's a power worker, and he was working out there, and I finished up. He finished up. He's sitting on the bench. I've got all my tools, and I'm walking up to the front of the house. And I thought about this message, knowing that this series was coming up. And I looked at you guys in my mind. And I looked at Hector sitting on the back porch. I looked at these tools, and I'm thinking, I've got so much to do. And I kept thinking that there's going to be a time in August where I'm going to be standing on this stage. I'm going to be sharing this with you. And I'm thinking, how can I share about walking across the street or walking across the lawn? How can I tell you about engaging with your neighbors if I'm not going to drop everything I'm doing and go over and sit and talk to him? So I dropped my tools, and I walked over, and I sat down, and I said, how's it going? He said, oh, it's going great, man. And so he what you don't know is Hector has this boat. It's just a little small battery-powered boat. We have a little retention pond in the back of our house. And he goes out there and plays with his boat and runs his boat around the pond. I saw the boat and had neighbor envy. So I told Michelle I want a boat. So she bought me a little boat, a little battery-powered boat for Christmas. We've never gotten our boats together. I see him out there. By the time I get my boat, he's already back inside. We've never gone boating together on our retention pond. And so I started, as I sat down to talk to I thought I'll just talk to him about his boat. I said, I see your boat out there. Your boat's a lot bigger than my boat. And he goes, yeah, and I just rebuilt the engine in it. Who does that? He goes, I just took the vacuum cleaner engine and put it in there. I'm like going, I don't know if I want any part of a boat race with this guy. But he took his vacuum cleaner out, built his engine back up with his boat. And so we're talking about that. And I was saying, yeah, I got this little boat that Michelle bought me. And this is what he said. And this is profound, you guys. He said, I bought the boat because back in my home neighborhood in Puerto Rico, he said all the neighbors used to get together all the time, and we'd talk, and we'd have barbecues, and we knew everybody, and we were together all the time. He goes, I moved here. He goes, I never see you guys. I never see anybody. And so I bought the boat so I could go down here and play in the pond and have something to do. And I just sat there, and I just stared at the water. And I was thinking about this day, standing up here, talking to you guys. And what am I going to say to him? And so I said, Hector, we need to do something about that. We need to have a barbecue and boat races together. And he said, that'd be great. I'd love to do that. Now, here's what I'm asking from you. And I'm putting myself on the line here. Will you hold me accountable? Like, I haven't done that yet, okay? Because I've been too busy. So, will you hold me accountable? Will you say, hey, have you had the barbecue and boat race yet? And I know you keep asking me that. I'm going to keep looking, and I got to do it. I know I got to do it. 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 I need to do it because it's what I need to do to engage, to love my neighbors. But why is it? Why is it that we don't engage with our neighbors? Why is it that we don't love our neighbors? I think if we were playing Family Feud right now, and we would say the number one answer is, what's the number one answer? Too busy. Yeah, too busy. I think that's our number one thing. It may be that we need to remove some things in our life in order to have the capacity to do what God asks us to do, to love our neighbors. I think it's because we don't trust them. Somebody said I wanted to cook brownies for my neighbors, but I was afraid because if somebody cooked brownies for me and brought them to me, honestly, I probably wouldn't eat them. I'd probably worry what they put in there. Somebody said that last service. I'm going, you're kind of right. That's because we don't know them. We don't trust them. We don't trust anybody. Or maybe it's because, I got burned once with a neighbor. I really got hurt bad by a neighbor one time, so I just kind of closed myself off. I'm not going to love anybody. It's my neighbor anymore. Some of you might say, have you seen my neighbor? There's no way. My wife will not let me love my neighbor, I'm not asking you to put yourself into a compromising situation here, You might say, I get so mad at him. He parks his vehicle. He's got his own space. Why does he park in front of my house? His dog's always going on my lawn, you know. And that may be your reason, you know. Maybe it's you. You might be the reason. So I want to ask this question. So I want you to write this down. I want you to wrestle with this. Go over this at lunch today as a family. If you're by yourself, write down the reasons. What is it that's keeping you from loving your neighbor? What is it? Is it too busy? Then do we need to change that? Is it because of a lack of trust? Then walk across the lawn and start having conversations. Get to know your neighbor. You know, what's the reason? Do something about it. What's keeping you from loving your neighbor? And here's what I want you to do. I don't want us just to come here, hear this message, and then go away and forget about it. I want us to do something about it. I've already laid myself on the line for you. I've said, and I'm asking you to hold me accountable. I'm going to commit. This is a pretty big commitment for me. I'm going to commit to having a neighborhood barbecue, and I'm going to invite my neighbor Hector, and he's going to come over, and we're going to have, and I might need you to come and help translate some for me, Angel, but we're going to have a boat race, okay? So I'm going to do that. I'm going to commit to doing that. This is what I want you to do. I want you to get into groups of 2 or 3 people. It might be just your spouse, might be your family. No man left behind here. We don't want anybody by themselves. This worked out beautifully first service. Every single person in our church was engaged and they were talking. So if it's groups of 2 or 3 or 4, whatever it is, I want you to get together right now and I want you to talk. This might make you uncomfortable. That's okay. You'll get over it. And so just get together, and I want you to answer and wrestle with this one question. What will I commit to do to love my neighbor at least through this series? I've got these 4 weeks in this series. What will I do? Now, some of you may say, hey, I'm not there yet. It's okay. Just be honest. I'm not there yet. I don't know if I'm ready to do that. So what I need to do first is I need God to begin to do some work inside of my own heart. Maybe you don't know God. Maybe that's your first step, that you need to get to know God first before you can engage with your neighbor. Some of you may say, you know, I'm an introvert and maybe your first commitment is you want to pray for your neighbor next door and pray that God will give you the courage and give you the strength for you to just walk across the street and introduce yourself. That's all we're asking. That's all we're asking. Maybe for some of you, it is taking flowers over or taking a gift over or sending them a card, whatever. Think about what will you do? How are you going to take this message and put it into action? Because that's the hope for our culture, you guys. So, right now, gather up. No man left behind. Nobody by themselves, okay? So if you see somebody by yourself, grab them, pull them into your group, and let's talk for 3 or 4 minutes here, okay? What are you going to do to commit?